Jacob adjusted the dials on the telescope, his fingers moving with practiced ease. The night was unusually quiet in the desert of New Mexico, the kind of silence that made you feel like the only person left on Earth. But tonight, the silence felt different, wrong, somehow. He leaned back in his chair and glanced at the monitor displaying data from the deep space array. Something wasn't right. For decades, Earth had been broadcasting a signal into the cosmos, a beacon announcing its presence to any intelligent life out there. It was humanity's way of saying, "We're here. We exist." But now, that signal had vanished. No warning, no explanation, just gone. Jacob frowned and tapped the screen, as if doing so might bring the numbers back to life. Nothing changed. "Rachel," he called out, his voice breaking the stillness of the observatory. "You seeing this?" Rachel looked up from her laptop at the other end of the room. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy bun, and her glasses were slightly crooked. She squinted at him before walking over. "Seeing what?" "You've been staring at those monitors for hours. Did you finally spot an alien spaceship or something?" "No," Jacob said, shaking his head. "It's the signal. It stopped." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Stopped? Like temporarily or permanently?" "That's the thing. I don't know yet. I've checked everything. The equipment is fine. There's no interference. It's like someone flipped a switch and turned it off." Rachel crossed her arms and studied the monitor. "That doesn't make sense. Who would do that? And why? This isn't some random radio station we're talking about. Turning off the signal would take high-level authorization, and even then, they'd have to give us a heads up." Jacob nodded. "Exactly. Which means either someone really powerful decided to shut it down without telling anyone, or something else did." Rachel gave him a skeptical look. "Something else? You're not seriously suggesting aliens came by and flipped the switch themselves, are you?" "I'm just saying it's a possibility," Jacob replied. "Think about it. If another civilization wanted us to stop broadcasting, maybe they found a way to interfere, or worse." He trailed off, but Rachel caught his meaning. "Worse," she prompted. "What if they didn't just want us to stop broadcasting? What if they wanted us to go silent completely?" The words hung in the air between them. Rachel opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. As much as she wanted to dismiss the idea as paranoia, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's assume you're right. Where do we even start looking for answers?" Jacob pointed to the map on the wall behind them. It showed locations of major satellite arrays and communication hubs around the world. If someone tampered with the signal, they'd need access to one of these sites. Maybe more than one. We should check for any unusual activity, power outages, security breaches, anything weird. Rachel sighed. "Great. So basically, we're playing detective now." "Wouldn't be the first time," Jacob said with a faint smile. "Besides, when has solving cosmic mysteries ever been boring?" As they began compiling data, neither of them noticed the faint hum coming from the corner of the room. It was soft at first, almost imperceptible. But as the minutes passed, it grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. Jacob paused mid-sentence, his eyes darting toward the sound. "Do you hear that?" Rachel froze. "Hear what?" Then she heard it too, a low, rhythmic pulsing, like a heartbeat echoing from somewhere far away. They exchanged a glance, both thinking the same thing. Whatever was happening, it wasn't normal. And it definitely wasn't over. Commander Lorthan stood at the head of the Grand Council chamber, his tall frame silhouetted against the glowing blue walls. The room was filled with Varens, beings with shimmering, translucent skin that pulsed faintly in rhythm with their emotions. Their elongated fingers tapped impatiently on the curved tables before them. Among them sat Alina, the human diplomat who had lived among the Varens for nearly a decade. She adjusted her translator device and leaned forward, her sharp green eyes scanning the room. "The signal from Earth has ceased," Lorthan announced, his voice deep and resonant. For centuries, they have broadcast their presence to the stars. Now, silence. A murmur rippled through the council. Some members exchanged worried glances, while others seemed indifferent. One of the elders, a Veran named Varric, spoke up. Why does this concern us? Humanity is young, reckless. Their disappearance may be of their own making. Alina clenched her fists under the table but kept her tone calm. With respect, Elder Varric, Earth's silence affects more than just humans. They are part of the galactic community now. If something catastrophic has happened, it could destabilize nearby systems, or worse, spread. Varric tilted his head, his pulsating skin flickering with skepticism. You speak as though you know what occurred. Do you? No, Alina admitted. But I do know humanity. They're curious, ambitious, and often careless. If their technology failed or was misused, the consequences could ripple outward. We can't ignore this. Another council member, a younger Veran named Kale, chimed in. Alina is right. Earth sits near key trade routes. Instability there could disrupt commerce and diplomacy across sectors. We must act. Lorthan raised a hand, silencing the debate. Sending ships to investigate would require resources we cannot spare. And if the threat is real, we risk losing valuable personnel. Before anyone could respond, the doors to the chamber slid open. Lieutenant Ava entered, her boots clicking softly on the polished floor. Her presence was unusual. She rarely attended council meetings. As a xenobiologist, she spent most of her time studying alien ecosystems, not politics. But tonight, her expression was grave. Commander, she said, addressing Lorthan directly, I've analyzed the data from our long-range scanners. There's something approaching Earth's solar system. The room fell silent. Even Varric leaned forward, his earlier indifference replaced by curiosity. What kind of something? He asked. Ava hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It's massive, larger than any vessel we've encountered. Its energy signature doesn't match any known species. It moves slowly but deliberately, as if it's searching for something. Alina's heart sank. Or someone, she whispered. Lorthan turned to her. You think this entity is connected to Earth's silence? It's possible, she replied. If Earth inadvertently attracted its attention, it might explain why the signal stopped. Maybe they tried to hide, or were silenced. Kale stood abruptly. Then we must send aid immediately. If this entity poses a threat, it won't stop at Earth. It will keep moving, consuming everything in its path. Varric scoffed. We don't even know if this is true. For all we know, humanity destroyed itself. Why should we risk our people for a species that refuses to learn caution? Alina rose to her feet, her voice firm. Because we owe it to them. Humans may be flawed, but they've also shown incredible potential. They've reached out to us, shared knowledge, built alliances. Turning away now isn't just cowardly, it's wrong. The council erupted into arguments, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Lorthan raised both hands, demanding order. When the room quieted, he locked eyes with Alina. Very well. We will dispatch a reconnaissance fleet to Earth's solar system. But if the danger proves too great, we will retreat. Our survival comes first. Alina nodded, relief washing over her. It wasn't a full commitment, but it was a start. As the council dispersed, Ava approached her. Do you really believe we can help them? She asked quietly. I have to, Alina replied. If we don't, no one else will. Unbeknownst to either of them, the massive entity continued its slow advance, its shadow stretching across the void like a predator stalking its prey. In Washington, D.C., Nathan Cross sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, staring at a wall of screens displaying streams of encrypted messages. A former CIA analyst turned whistleblower, Nathan had spent years uncovering secrets buried deep within government databases. Tonight, however, something felt different. The patterns he was seeing weren't random. They were deliberate. Lines of code hinted at a covert operation labeled Project Echo. He didn't know what it meant yet, but one thing was clear. Whatever Project Echo was, it had something to do with Earth's sudden silence. Nathan leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. His phone buzzed on the desk, startling him. It was a secure line. Only a handful of people had the number. He answered cautiously. "Cross." "It's Rachel," came the voice on the other end. "We need to talk." Nathan straightened up. Rachel wasn't one for small talk, and if she was calling him directly, it meant trouble. "What's going on?" "We've been looking into the signal blackout," she said quickly. "Jacob and I found evidence of tampering, not just with the broadcast, but with systems all over the world. Power grids, satellites, communication networks. It's like someone, or something, is systematically shutting everything down." Nathan's stomach tightened. "Does this tie into Project Echo?" There was a pause on the other end. "I don't know yet, but we're close to finding out. Can you meet us? We're heading to a facility in Wyoming, where some of the earliest experiments took place." "I'll be there," Nathan said without hesitation. He ended the call and stared at the screens again. Whatever Project Echo was, it wasn't supposed to see the light of day. If Rachel and Jacob were onto something, they might be walking into more danger than they realized. Hundreds of miles away, in rural Montana, Emma Carter stood barefoot in her field, staring at the sky. The stars seemed brighter tonight, almost too bright. She wrapped her sweater tighter around herself as a chill ran down her spine. Something about the air felt wrong, charged, like the calm before a storm. Then she saw them. Lights, dozens of them, hovering silently above her crops. They weren't planes or drones. They moved too smoothly, too deliberately. Emma froze, unsure whether to run or stay. Before she could decide, the lights descended, bathing the field in an eerie glow. She shielded her eyes and stumbled backward, tripping over a rock and falling hard onto the dirt. When she opened her eyes again, the lights were gone. In their place was a patch of scorched earth, blackened and cracked as if struck by lightning. But that wasn't all. Etched into the ground were strange symbols, swirling patterns that seemed to pulse faintly under the moonlight. Emma reached out to touch one, but a sharp pain shot through her hand, forcing her to pull back. Her heart raced as she scrambled to her feet. She grabbed her phone and snapped pictures of the markings, though she doubted anyone would believe her. As she turned to leave, she noticed something else. The symbols weren't confined to her field. They stretched beyond the fence, disappearing into the horizon. It was as if the entire area had been marked, claimed by some unseen force. Emma didn't sleep that night. She packed a bag with essentials, clothes, water, a flashlight, and set off in her truck before dawn. She didn't know where she was going, only that she couldn't stay. The symbols haunted her thoughts, their shapes twisting in her mind like fragments of a forgotten language. By mid-morning, she found herself on a deserted highway, scanning the radio for news. Static greeted her at every frequency until, finally, a voice broke through. Reports of widespread power outages across the Midwest. The voice crackled. Authorities urge citizens to remain indoors as investigations continue. Emma gripped the steering wheel tightly. Whatever was happening, it wasn't just in her field. It was everywhere, and she had a sinking feeling that running wouldn't be enough to escape it. On board the alien vessel Zenthra*, Captain Rennar paced the command deck, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic display hovering above the central console. The ship's sleek interior glowed faintly with soft blue light, casting long shadows across the faces of his crew. Among them was Lieutenant Ava, who stood beside him, her arms crossed as she studied the data streaming in from their reconnaissance probe. The probe had been sent to Earth's solar system hours earlier, tasked with gathering information about the mysterious entity approaching the planet. What it found chilled them all to the core. The footage showed Earth shrouded in a strange, pulsating energy field that seemed alive, shifting and writhing like a living organism. Beneath it, cities were darkened, oceans eerily still, and skies devoid of aircraft or satellites. It was as if the entire planet had been frozen in time. "The field is unlike anything we've encountered," Ava said, breaking the tense silence. "It's not just blocking communication, it's consuming energy. Every attempt the probe made to penetrate it resulted in catastrophic feedback. We lost 3 drones already." Reinar nodded grimly. "And the humans? Any signs of life?" Ava hesitated, her voice quieter now. "Some, but they're erratic. Movement patterns suggest panic. Groups of people are fleeing urban areas, heading toward rural regions. Many seem disoriented, almost as if they're being driven mad." Reinar clenched his jaw. "Driven mad by what?" "We don't know yet," Ava admitted. "But there's more." She tapped a few commands on her wrist console, and the hologram shifted to show fragmented images captured by the probe. Strange symbols etched into the ground, identical to those Emma Carter had discovered in Montana. These markings appeared globally within hours of the energy field forming. They match ancient designs found in human mythology, symbols associated with entities humans once called gods or demons. Reinar frowned. "You think this is some kind of religious phenomenon?" "No," Ava replied firmly. "I think it's something far older. Something unnatural." Before Reinar could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. The crews sprang into action, rushing to their stations as warning lights flashed red. On the holographic display, the probe's signal flickered violently before cutting out entirely. Moments later, a massive shape emerged on the edge of their sensors, a colossal, shadowy form moving silently through space. "It's here," one of the crew members whispered, their voice trembling. The entity filled the view screen, its surface rippling like liquid darkness. Jagged spires jutted outward, twisting and reforming as though the thing itself was alive. It radiated a low hum that resonated deep within the crew's bones, making it hard to think clearly. Reinar barked orders, his voice cutting through the growing dread. "Raise shields. Prepare evasive maneuvers." But the entity didn't attack. Instead, it extended a tendril of shadow toward the *Zenthra*, probing the ship's defenses. Alarms screamed as the hull groaned under the pressure. Sparks flew from overloaded consoles, and several crew members collapsed, clutching their heads in pain. "Captain," Ava shouted over the chaos, "we can't hold it off much longer." Reinar gritted his teeth, his mind racing. "Initiate emergency retreat protocol. Get us out of here." The ship lurched as engines roared to life, but the entity's grip tightened. Just when it seemed they wouldn't escape, the tendril retracted suddenly, leaving the *Zenthra* adrift but intact. For a moment, the crew stared at each other in stunned silence, unsure why they'd been spared. Then the comms crackled to life. A distorted voice echoed through the ship, not spoken, but felt as though it were invading their thoughts. "You will leave this place," it intoned, cold and unyielding, "or you will perish." Reinar exchanged a glance with Ava, both understanding the gravity of the message. Whatever this entity was, it wasn't just a threat to Earth. It was a force beyond comprehension. And it had given them a clear warning: stay away, or face annihilation. As the *Zenthra* limped back toward friendly space, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't truly escaped. The entity's voice lingered in her mind, a chilling reminder that humanity's fate might already be sealed. Jacob crouched in the dimly lit corridor of an abandoned military base, his flashlight casting shaky beams across walls covered in dust and peeling paint. Rachel followed close behind, her arms filled with old files they'd salvaged from a crumbling desk. The air smelled of mildew and rust, but neither of them cared. They were too focused on piecing together the puzzle of Project Echo. "This has to be it," Jacob muttered, flipping through a folder marked classified. His hands trembled as he skimmed the pages. "Look at this. Experiments involving dark matter manipulation. They were trying to open some kind of gateway." Rachel frowned, leaning over his shoulder. A gateway? To where? That's the problem. They don't say. But there are references to ancient entities and cosmic forces. Whoever was running this project knew exactly what they were messing with. Before Rachel could respond, a loud crash echoed down the hallway. Both froze, their flashlights darting toward the sound. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, grew louder. Someone, or something, was coming. Quick, hide. Jacob whispered urgently, pulling Rachel into a nearby storage room. They pressed themselves against the wall, holding their breath as the footsteps passed by. Through the crack in the door, they saw shadows moving. Figures clad in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by helmets. One of them carried a device that glowed faintly, emitting a low hum. "They're looking for something," Rachel whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you think they know we're here?" Jacob shook his head. "I don't know. But if they find us—" He didn't finish the thought. Instead, he motioned for her to stay quiet as the figures disappeared around a corner. When the coast seemed clear, they slipped out of the storage room and hurried toward the exit. But before they could reach it, another figure emerged from the shadows. This one unexpected. It was Emma Carter, her face pale and streaked with dirt, clutching a backpack tightly to her chest. "You," Jacob said, startled. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," Emma replied, her voice steady despite her obvious exhaustion. "I've been following those symbols. They led me here." Rachel stepped forward cautiously. "Symbols? You've seen them too?" Emma nodded. "Everywhere. In my fields, on roadsides, even carved into mountainsides. Something's using them to mark territory. I think whatever's causing Earth's silence is connected." Jacob exchanged a glance with Rachel. "She's right. These symbols match the ones mentioned in the files. This isn't just about Earth. It's about unleashing something ancient." As they spoke, the hum from earlier grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. The agents in black reappeared, surrounding them. One raised a weapon, its barrel glowing ominously. "Drop the documents," the lead agent ordered, his voice cold and mechanical. "Now." Jacob hesitated, clutching the folder tighter. "If we give this to you, no one will ever know the truth." The agent tilted his head, unmoved. "Truth doesn't matter anymore. Hand it over, or die." Before anyone could react, Emma lunged forward, throwing a rock she'd picked up earlier. It struck the agent's weapon, causing it to malfunction. Sparks flew as chaos erupted. Taking advantage of the distraction, Jacob grabbed Rachel's hand and bolted toward the exit, shouting for Emma to follow. They burst outside into the cool night air, hearts pounding as they sprinted across the barren landscape. Behind them, shouts and gunfire echoed. But they didn't look back. They ran until their legs burned, finally collapsing behind a cluster of rocks. Gasping for breath, Emma looked at Jacob. "So, what's the plan now?" Jacob managed a weak smile. "We survive, and we fight back." For the first time since Earth went silent, hope flickered in their eyes. Not because they believed winning would be easy, but because giving up wasn't an option. Huddled in a makeshift camp deep within the Montana wilderness, Jacob spread the stolen documents across a rickety wooden table. The flickering light of a small lantern cast long shadows on the surrounding trees. Rachel and Emma sat nearby, their faces tense as they listened to him explain what he'd uncovered. "These symbols," Jacob said, pointing to sketches he'd drawn based on the files, "aren't random. They're part of a pattern, an ancient language used by civilizations that vanished thousands of years ago. According to the notes, this language was meant to summon something called the Void." Emma frowned. "The Void? That sounds ominous." "It is," Jacob replied grimly. "According to these records, the Void isn't just a concept. It's an entity, a parasitic consciousness that feeds on energy, life, entire worlds. It was sealed away eons ago, but Project Echo seems to have reopened the door." Rachel leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. You're saying humanity woke it up. Not intentionally, Jacob corrected. They thought they were experimenting with dark matter, trying to harness its power. But instead, they tore open a rift, letting the void seep through. Emma shivered, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. And now it's here, on Earth. Those symbols we've been seeing. They're markers, aren't they? Like breadcrumbs leading back to wherever it came from. Jacob nodded. Exactly. And if we don't stop it, it won't just consume Earth. It'll keep spreading, devouring everything in its path. Rachel sighed, running a hand through her hair. Okay, so how do we stop it? We can't exactly fight something like that with flashlights and rocks. Jacob hesitated, flipping through more pages. There might be a way. The files mention a prototype device, the same one used to open the rift. If we can find it and reverse the process, we might be able to seal the void again. Emma raised an eyebrow. That sounds simple enough. Where is it? That's the problem, Jacob admitted. It's hidden in a secure facility buried under Cheyenne Mountain. Getting there won't be easy. Before anyone could respond, the sound of footsteps crunched in the underbrush. All three froze, their eyes darting toward the trees. A man emerged from the darkness, Nathan Cross, his face pale and drawn but determined. I heard you talking, Nathan said, holding up his hands to show he wasn't armed. I followed you after you left Wyoming. I think I know where the prototype is, and how to get to it. Jacob narrowed his eyes. Why should we trust you? Because I'm the one who planted the failsafe, Nathan replied. His voice was steady, though his hands trembled slightly. Years ago, when I realized what Project Echo was doing, I built a mechanism into the device. If activated, it resets the experiment, but someone has to stay behind to trigger it. The group fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, Rachel spoke. So whoever stays behind doesn't make it out. Nathan nodded. But if no one does, none of us will survive anyway. Emma stood abruptly, her jaw set. Then let's not waste time arguing about it. Let's go. As dawn broke over the horizon, the four of them packed their supplies and set off toward Colorado. Each step felt heavier than the last, not just because of the terrain, but because of the choice looming ahead. Somewhere along the journey, one of them would have to make the ultimate sacrifice. Yet despite the fear gnawing at them, they pressed on, driven by the hope that even in the face of annihilation, humanity still had a chance to fight back. The alien fleet arrived at Earth's solar system with a mixture of caution and determination. Commander Lorthan stood on the bridge of the lead ship, his translucent skin glowing faintly as he studied the ominous energy field surrounding the planet. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, and sent shivers down the spines of even the most seasoned Varen officers. We've reached the edge of the field, reported one of the crew members. Shields are at maximum strength. Lorthan nodded. Prepare to deploy the reconnaissance drones. We need data, anything that can help us understand what we're dealing with. Lieutenant Ava watched anxiously as the small robotic probes were launched into the void. They moved cautiously, their sensors scanning for weaknesses in the barrier. For a moment, it seemed they might succeed. Then, without warning, the drones were engulfed by bursts of energy, their signals vanishing instantly. It's attacking them, shouted another officer. The field is alive. Ava clenched her fists, frustration bubbling inside her. This isn't just a shield. It's a weapon. It knows we're here. Before Lorthan could respond, the massive entity appeared once more, emerging from the darkness beyond the field. Its jagged form loomed over the fleet, radiating an aura of menace that made every being aboard the ships feel small and insignificant. Tendrils of shadow extended toward the vessels, probing their defenses. Alarms blared as the holds groaned under the pressure. Evasive maneuvers, Lorthan commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around him. All ships, retreat to safe distance. The fleet tried to pull back, engines roaring as they fought against the entity's pull. But it was no use. One of the smaller ships was caught in the tendrils' grasp, its structure beginning to buckle. Moments later, it exploded in a blinding flash of light, leaving nothing but debris drifting silently in space. "We can't win this fight," Ava said quietly, her eyes fixed on the destruction. "Not like this." Lorthan turned to her, his expression grim. "Then we must find another way. If humanity has any hope of surviving, we need to work with them, not against this thing." Back on Earth, Jacob, Rachel, Emma, and Nathan approached Cheyenne Mountain, their breath visible in the cold morning air. Armed soldiers patrolled the perimeter, their faces masked and unreadable. The facility was heavily guarded, its entrance concealed behind layers of rock and steel. "This is insane," Emma whispered, clutching her backpack tighter. "How are we supposed to get past all those people?" Nathan stepped forward, pulling out a device from his pocket. "Leave that to me. I designed some of these systems. This should disable the external cameras long enough for us to slip inside." He activated the device, and a low hum filled the air. The nearest camera swiveled erratically before going dark. Motioning for the others to follow, Nathan led them toward a service entrance partially hidden by bushes. With careful precision, he bypassed the lock and pushed the door open. Inside, the corridors were eerily quiet, lit only by emergency lights. The air smelled stale, as though the place had been abandoned in haste. Jacob glanced at the map Nathan had sketched earlier. The prototype lab should be 3 levels down. "Let's move quickly." As they descended deeper into the facility, the temperature dropped noticeably. Strange symbols began appearing on the walls, glowing faintly, pulsing in time with the distant hum of machinery. Each step felt heavier, as if the weight of the world itself pressed down on them. When they finally reached the lab, they found it sealed behind a reinforced door. Nathan typed furiously on a keypad mounted beside it. Almost there. Suddenly, the lights flickered, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the corridor, not spoken aloud, but felt directly in their minds. "You cannot stop what has begun," it intoned, chilling them to the bone. Rachel grabbed Jacob's arm, her voice trembling. "What was that?" Nathan didn't look up, his fingers flying across the keypad. "It's the void. It knows we're here." The door hissed open, revealing the prototype device, a towering machine covered in wires and blinking lights. In its center was a swirling vortex of dark energy, crackling ominously. "This is it," Jacob said, his voice barely audible. "Our last chance." But as they stepped inside, the symbols on the walls flared brighter, and the hum grew deafening. Whatever happened next, they all knew one thing: they were running out of time. Inside the lab, the air crackled with tension as Jacob approached the prototype device. The swirling vortex of dark energy at its center seemed to pulse in rhythm with his racing heart. He glanced at Nathan, who was already crouched beside a control panel, his fingers flying over buttons and switches. "This thing is more complex than I thought," Nathan muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. "I can disable the rift, but activating the failsafe will trigger a countdown. Once it starts, there's no stopping it." "How long do we have?" Rachel asked, her voice tight with anxiety. 10 minutes, Nathan replied without looking up. "Maybe less." Emma stepped closer to the machine, her eyes fixed on the symbols etched into its surface. They matched the ones she'd seen in her fields, glowing faintly now, as if responding to their presence. "If this works," she said softly, "what happens next?" "It seals the rift," Jacob explained. "But it'll take everything the void has consumed, including whatever part of Earth it's already taken hold of." A heavy silence fell over the group. They all understood what that meant. Parts of the planet might never recover. But staying silent wasn't an option either. The void would keep spreading until nothing remained. Nathan stood abruptly, wiping his hands on his jacket. "It's ready. All we need to do is activate the sequence." His gaze shifted between them, lingering longest on Emma. "One of us has to stay behind." "No," Emma said firmly, stepping forward. "I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself. You've done enough." "This isn't about me," Nathan snapped, his voice breaking slightly. "It's about doing what needs to be done. I built this thing. I know how it works. If anyone stays, it should be me." Before anyone could argue further, the lights flickered violently, and the hum grew louder. The symbols on the walls flared brighter, casting eerie shadows across the room. From somewhere deep within the facility came a low rumble, like the growl of an angry beast. "We're out of time," Rachel said urgently. "We need to decide. Now." Jacob looked at Nathan, then at Emma. "There's another way. We split up. 2 of us stay here to monitor the failsafe while the others create a distraction. That way, we increase our chances of getting out alive." Nathan shook his head. "Distractions won't matter once the void realizes what we're doing. It'll come for us, all of us." Despite the fear clawing at her chest, Emma squared her shoulders. "Then let's make sure it doesn't get the chance." Without waiting for agreement, she moved toward the controls and pressed a button marked Initiate. A loud alarm blared, and red warning lights began flashing. On the screen above the machine, numbers appeared: 10 o'clock, 9:59, 9:58. "You shouldn't have done that," Nathan shouted, rushing back to the panel. "I just did your job for you," Emma shot back, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Now go. Don't waste the time I bought us." Rachel grabbed Jacob's arm. "Come on. We need to move." Reluctantly, Jacob followed her toward the exit, glancing back one last time. Nathan hesitated, torn between staying or leaving. Finally, he made his choice. "Take care of yourselves," he said quietly, turning to join Emma. As the door slammed shut behind Jacob and Rachel, Nathan turned to Emma. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," she replied, her voice softer now. "Someone had to." The 2 of them stood side by side as the countdown continued. 7:30, 7:29. Outside, explosions rocked the facility as the void fought to break through. Nathan typed furiously on the console, trying to stabilize the process. "If we survive this," he said, forcing a weak smile, "remind me to write a better instruction manual next time." Emma laughed nervously, clutching the edge of the table as the ground trembled beneath their feet. "Deal." Farther away, Jacob and Rachel sprinted through the corridors, dodging falling debris and bursts of energy. Behind them, the hum grew louder, almost deafening. They burst outside just as the first shockwave hit, sending them tumbling to the ground. When they looked back, the mountain seemed alive, glowing with an unnatural light. "It's working," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. But as the dust settled and the trembling subsided, neither of them dared to celebrate. Somewhere inside that mountain, Nathan and Emma were still fighting, not just for their lives, but for the future of humanity itself. Inside the lab, Nathan and Emma braced themselves as the countdown ticked closer to 0. 2:15, 2:14. The machine roared louder with each passing second, its vortex of dark energy swirling faster, pulling at the edges of reality itself. The symbols on the walls pulsed brighter, their glow almost blinding now, and the air grew thick and heavy, making it hard to breathe. "We're running out of time," Nathan shouted over the noise, his hands moving frantically across the control panel. "The failsafe is destabilizing." Emma clutched the edge of the table, her knuckles white. "What does that mean?" "It means if we don't stabilize it, the whole thing collapses and takes half the planet with it," he replied, panic creeping into his voice for the first time. He glanced at her briefly before returning his focus to the console. "I need a minute to recalibrate the sequence." "You don't have a minute," Emma yelled back, her eyes darting toward the screen. 1:45, 1:44. Nathan slammed his fist against the panel in frustration. "Then we're dead anyway." For a moment, neither of them spoke, the weight of their situation pressing down on them like an invisible force. Outside, the ground shook violently as the void fought to reclaim what was being taken from it. Cracks spread across the walls, and sparks rained down from exposed wires above. Emma took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "Tell me what to do." Nathan stared at her, surprised by her sudden determination. "What?" "You heard me. Tell me how to help. I'm not just standing here waiting to die." He hesitated, then pointed to a series of switches on the far side of the console. "Flip those. Start with the red one, then the blue. But be careful. If you mess up the order, the system will overload." Emma nodded and moved quickly, her hands steady despite the chaos around them. As she worked, Nathan typed furiously on his side of the panel, muttering calculations under his breath. The machine groaned in protest, its energy field flickering erratically. "Okay, now pull the lever on your right. But wait for my signal," Nathan instructed, his voice strained. Emma gripped the lever tightly, her muscles tense. "Now. Now," he shouted. She yanked it down with all her strength. For a split second, everything went silent. The hum stopped, the lights dimmed, and even the trembling ground seemed to freeze. Then, with a deafening roar, the machine surged back to life, this time glowing with a brilliant white light. "It's working," Nathan exclaimed, relief washing over his face. "The rift is closing." But the victory was short-lived. A massive tremor rocked the room, nearly knocking them off their feet. From the corner of her eye, Emma saw shadows seeping through the cracks in the walls, tendrils of darkness reaching out, trying to reclaim the space. "The void isn't giving up," she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. Nathan grabbed her arm, his expression grim. "There's no way both of us are getting out of here. You need to go." "No," Emma protested, shaking her head. "We stick together. That was the plan." "There's no time to argue," he snapped, shoving her toward the exit. "Get out of here while you still can." Before she could respond, he turned back to the console and began overwriting the final sequence. The countdown sped up unnaturally. 0:30, 0:29. Emma hesitated, torn between leaving and staying. Finally, with tears streaming down her face, she turned and ran, shouting over her shoulder, "Thank you." As she disappeared through the door, Nathan let out a shaky sigh and focused on the task at hand. His hands moved with practiced precision, ensuring the failsafe would hold long enough to seal the rift. The shadows closed in around him, whispering promises of power and destruction, but he ignored them, his mind fixed on one goal: saving humanity. Outside, Emma stumbled into the fresh air just as the mountain erupted in a blinding flash of light. She fell to her knees, shielding her face as heat washed over her. When she looked back, the facility was gone, replaced by a crater smoking faintly in the early morning sun. Farther away, Jacob and Rachel watched the explosion in stunned silence. Neither of them dared to speak, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what had been sacrificed. But as the dust settled and the horizon brightened, they realized something else. Earth was still alive, and so were they. Somewhere in the distance, birds began to sing again. The days that followed were a blur of rebuilding and recovery. Survivors emerged from hiding, their faces etched with exhaustion, but also a fragile hope. Cities lay in ruins, power grids struggled to come back online, and communication networks remained patchy at best. Yet amidst the devastation, people worked together, clearing debris, sharing food, and comforting one another. Humanity had faced its darkest hour, and somehow it had survived. Jacob stood on a hill overlooking what remained of Cheyenne Mountain, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. The crater where the facility once stood was still smoldering, a grim reminder of the cost of their victory. Beside him, Rachel sighed heavily, her arms crossed tightly against the cold wind. "He saved us," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Nathan, Emma, they gave everything." Jacob nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He thought about Emma's determination, Nathan's sacrifice, and all the others who hadn't made it. Their actions had ensured that Earth wasn't consumed entirely by the void, but scars would remain for generations. In the distance, alien ships descended slowly from the sky, landing gently in open fields and barren wastelands. Varen engineers and scientists disembarked, carrying tools and supplies. Lieutenant Ava stepped out of one of the vessels, her expression solemn as she surveyed the damage. She approached Jacob and Rachel, offering a small nod of respect. "We're here to help," she said simply. "Whatever you need." Rachel managed a weak smile. "Thank you. We couldn't have done this without you." Ava shook her head. "You're wrong. It was your courage and your willingness to fight that made the difference. We only followed your lead." As the Varens began assisting survivors, word spread quickly about humanity's brush with annihilation. News outlets around the world broadcast images of the destruction alongside interviews with those who'd witnessed the event firsthand. For the first time in history, nations put aside their differences, united by the shared understanding that survival required cooperation, not conflict. Weeks later, Jacob found himself standing before a group of scientists and diplomats gathered at a temporary headquarters outside Colorado Springs. Elena, the human diplomat who had fought tirelessly to rally galactic support, addressed the crowd. "This isn't just humanity's story," she said firmly. "It's a warning for every species everywhere. The universe is vast, but it's also fragile. If we don't learn to protect it, to respect it, we risk losing everything." Her words resonated deeply with everyone present. Plans were drawn up for new alliances, stricter regulations on advanced technologies, and ongoing monitoring of cosmic phenomena. Humanity wasn't alone anymore. It was part of something greater, a community determined to prevent such a catastrophe from happening again. But even as progress was made, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that the void wasn't truly gone. Somewhere in the depths of space, it waited, silent, patient, biding its time. He often thought about Nathan's final moments, wondering if he'd known how much his sacrifice meant. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jacob sat alone under a star-filled sky. Rachel joined him after a while, handing him a cup of coffee. Neither spoke for a long time, content to simply watch the stars twinkle above. "We'll be okay," Rachel said finally, her voice quiet but sure. "Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually." Jacob nodded, letting her words sink in. "Yeah, we will." And for the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to believe it.